The Children of Lir, based on the translation by Peter Beresford Ellis. It happened after the Druid, the gods and goddesses of Erin, were defeated by the mortal sons of the Milesian Gaels. No one can now recall the circumstance of the conflict, except that there was a great battle fought at Taillte, which is now called Telltown, on the north bank of the river Blackwater in County Meath. A great fair was held there in ancient times, and this fair was sacred to the goddess Taillte, who was the foster mother of the magnificent Lugh of the Long Hand. Blood stained the fields of Taillte for many years afterwards, for there was a great slaughter in that place. The mortals drove the ever-living ones from the face of the earth, so that ever after they went to live with the hills, and being people lost in people's memories, they became the people of the hills, or simply the fairies. This was some distance in the future from the time of the sad tale of the Lir children. It was soon after the devastation of Taillte that the remnants of the Druid gathered and decided to choose a new king to rule them. The Dagda, the good god, who had ruled before, had told them that, as he had brought about their downfall, he was not fit to continue to lead them, so they chose the Bodaric, who was the son of the Dagda, and he dwelt in the Sheed Fearman in County Tipperary. It fell to the Bodaric to allocate the hills to the other gods and goddesses, as these were to become as their dwelling places. To Lir, the god of the ocean, Dead Man's Hill in County Armagh. Now Lir thought he should have been chosen as ruler over the children of Danu, and was filled with anger and envy at the decision. He left the assembly of gods and goddesses so angry that he would talk to no one. He showed neither respect nor homage to the Bodaric. The gods and goddesses became angry at him, and were all for raising a host and marching against him. But it was the Bodaric himself who prevented this. "We have shed enough blood against the Milesians," he told them. "Let's not continue shedding blood amongst ourselves. Because Lir does not bow his knee to me, it does not make him any less your king. Let me go and reason with him." The gods and goddesses of Erin were impressed by the compassion and wisdom of the Bodaric, and pleased that they had made him the ruler. It was a while before the Bodaric approached Lir, for he knew it best to let the anger die away first. Indeed, while he was waiting, it happened that Lir's wife, the mother of the magnificent MacManaman Lir, died. Lir became lonely and bitter. More lonely was he because no other god nor goddess would visit him at the Shee, for they refused to speak to him after he'd walked out of the assembly. After the appropriate period of mourning, the Bodaric sent greetings to Lir. "This is the time when one stands in need of friends and king's counsel," Bodaric told his followers. The message that the Bodaric sent, to the effect if Lir accepted him as king over the children of Danu, he would arrange a marriage with one of the three foster daughters. They were Niamh, Aoife, and Eamh, daughters of Ail, the king of the islands of Arran. Indeed, it was known that Niamh, Aoife, and Eamh were among the most beautiful women and the most intelligent and accomplished. Lir was delighted, for he had grown weary of his isolation and sadness, the loss of his dearest companion, so he set out with 50 chariots until they reached the palace of the Bodaric. There he embraced the king and acknowledged him in due fashion. There was a great banquet that night, and the feasting lasted for several days. All the people of Danu were happy to see Lir back in their company. Eventually, the three foster daughters of the Bodaric were brought forward. Lir gazed on them with awe, for each one was as beautiful as the other. Niamh, the eldest, was dark and pale. Aoife, the middle girl, was red-haired and cream-skinned, while Abe, the youngest, was fair-haired and bright. They combined the qualities of winter, autumn, and spring, and when he spoke with them, Lir was amazed at their intelligence and wit. The choice was difficult, but Lir finally chose Abe, for she was young and fresh, and had a beauty of spring and the promise of the future. In the fullness of time, Abe bore the Lir children. In truth, she gave birth to 2 sets of twins. The first was a boy and a girl whom she called Abe Fanula, meaning fire or fair-shouldered, and the second set were 2 boys called Fikra and Con, meaning battle king and wisdom. Now in the bearing of these children, the gentle Abe died, and Lir's sadness was again great. Only his children gave him joy. However, the Bodaric came to him and said, "Choose another wife from Niamh and Aoife, that they may comfort you and help you raise Abe's children." So Lir chose Aoife of the autumn tresses, and for a while they were happy, But Aoife grew jealous of her sister's children, for she was not blessed with children herself. More and more did she resort into confining herself to the Druids with magical powers, who taught her the secret arts. The bards of jealousy tortured her soul and turned it to hatred for the children, so that in the end she became obsessed with malice. The obsession turned into excessive illness, and for a year and a day she lay in her chamber, not coming out, not even for her husband. Her sickness overwhelmed her, so that her mind became unhinged. Then, after a year and a day, she rose from her bed and re-entered the world, professing herself cured. Lir and his children were pleased to see her so apparently recovered. She called the children to her and said, as she was now so well, she was going on a visit to the Bo Derek. Now the boys were delighted at this. Fionnuala, with a woman's intuition, was suspicious about her stepmother. She had a dark, foreboding dream that Aoife intended them harm and that some terrible deed was lurking in her mind. Yet everyone seemed happy. Lir was delighted to see his wife risen from her sick bed and well. Also he was pleased that she was taking the children on a trip to see the Bo Derek. So Fionnuala kept her suspicions to herself, for fear that she would be scoffed at or be called an ungrateful brat. Aoife's fine carriage came to the gates and the children went with her, with Lir bidding them a fond farewell. The carriage set off, accompanied by a bodyguard with Aoife's personal attendants. Off they went. They had not journeyed many a miles when Aoife contrived to stop the carriage and drew aside her trusted manservant Conan. "How well do you love me, Conan?" she whispered, that no one else would hear. The old man was puzzled. "Didn't I come with you from your father's court at Arran to the palace of the Bo Derek when you were but a child?" he demanded. "Have I not watched over you and seen you grow, and never a hair of your head was allowed to come to any harm?" "Then you love me well. What would you do for me in that love?" "There is nothing in this world, nor in the other world, that I would not do," affirmed the old man. "If I were in danger or about to suffer great loss, would you serve me well?" "I would so, my lady. I would remove the danger and restore whatever loss you encountered." "Well, I'm in danger of losing my husband's love," sighed Aoife. Conan's eyes blazed. "Tell me the name of she who would come to steal that love, and she will not live to see the sunset." "It is no woman who has robbed me of Lir's love, Conan. See those children in the carriage? They are the cause of this neglect to me. They have destroyed my happiness. If they were removed, all would be well." Conan realized what she was saying. His eyes widened in horror as he took a step backwards. But they are your sister's children, the children of your husband," he gasped. "As much as I nursed and looked after you, I have also looked after her." Aoife's eyes were the cold fires of the darkest underworld, and she saw in his look disgust. Hate and jealousy were so great within her that she saw it only as a personal betrayal. She turned in anger and accosted more of her personal retainers, and each one of them were as horrified as old Conan had been at what she was suggesting be done to the children. Finally they set off again and came to the shores of Loch, which is now in County Westmeath. There they camped the night, and that night Aoife took herself a sword in hand and went to the sleeping children. She was fully determined to kill them all, herself if she had to, but a strange emotion swayed her hand. She stood sword raised while her sister's blood fought with her own. She found that she could not do the wicked deed. But the evil in her was not to be thwarted. She went back into her own tent and came out with a magical wand which one of the dark druids had given to her. The next morning before breakfast, she suggested that the children should go and bathe in the waters of the loch. In their joy they cast off their clothes and ran into the waters. As they did so, Aoife touched them with her wand and sang out a cruel magical chant which turned all four into swans with snowy white feathers. At first the children struggled against their new forms, bewildered and frightened, but there was no escape. Finally they settled down and swam close to the shore, where Aoife was chuckling with evil joy. But her evil spell had not worked entirely, for each of the children still possessed the power of human speech. Fionnuala called out, "O stepmother, what have we done to you, that you should repay us with this terrible deed?" Aoife sneered at them. "Pests! You stole the love of your father from me." Fionnuala lowered her neck in sadness. His love for us was not the same as his love for you. Surely you should know the difference between love for one's children and love for one's wife. Aoife stamped her foot in rage. You will cackle with the birds till you die. Oh, Aoife, stepmother, what have you done? We'll cry out for vengeance as long as that vengeance takes to reach you. Foolish woman, your punishment will be greater than our plight. One thing you may do, in virtue of the common blood we share, tell us when this misery will end. Aoife smiled thinly. Her face was ugly. It's a wiser thing not to have that question answered. However, as it will add to your suffering and misery, here is the answer. You will spend 300 years on this loch, 300 more between Erin and the high-hilled Alba, and then 300 more years off Irisdovan. No power in this world nor the other world will free you until time is past, until a prince of Connacht marries a prince of Mohan. Because my spell was incomplete, you are left with the ability to make human speech. You have the gift to make sweet music which calms and soothes all who hear it. That is your only gift. Then the evil Aoife turned and ordered her carriage to be made ready. She left with her group, and behind her were the 4 swans swimming in the lonely lake. The children of Lir huddled together and raised their heads in a lament, not for themselves, but for their father. Sad our hearts break for Lir, red eyes searching the world for us, hopeful and seeking shadows in forests, on mountains, seeking forms in skies and on land, seeking his lost children torn from his bosom, now in swan forming swimming in waters of foamy strange shores. Now when Aoife and her entourage arrived at the palace of the Bodaric, there was great rejoicing at her recovery from her illness. A great feast had been prepared. After the Bodaric had welcomed her, he peered around with curiosity. I thought you were bringing your sister's children with you. Where are they, your own foster children, the children of Lir? Now Aoife blushed, but she had a story ready. They are not with me because Lir refused to let me bring them. He has turned against me. Likewise, he says he is no friend to you, for you usurped the love of the Danann and the title of king, which should be rightfully his. He does not want his children placed in your safekeeping, for you will surely harm them. Now the Bodaric was truly astonished when he heard these words from Aoife. This surely cannot be. Lir knows how much I love those children, if they were my own. The Bodaric was no fool, and some suspicion of mischief formed in his mind. He sent a messenger immediately to Lir, telling him that Aoife had arrived alone, and was saying that Lir had refused to allow the children to come with her. Immediately he received this word. Lir mounted his fastest chariot and was away to the palace of the Bodaric. In the meantime, the Bodaric grew more uneasy, for when he questioned Aoife more closely, he found many discrepancies in her answers, and so he summoned her servants and began to question them. Meanwhile, Lir and his escort decided to encamp the night on the shore. The 4 children of Lir, in their guise as swans, saw their father and his warriors approaching them, and they swam to the shallows, raising their voices in a sad song. Lir heard the song and came racing to the shore to listen to the swans crying in human voices, for there was the voice of his daughter Fionnuala. Father, dearest father, know that I am your daughter, Fionnuala, and these are your sons now changed into swans, and ruined by the hatred of the evil crafts of Aoife, our stepmother, sister to our own mother. Lir raised his voice in a terrible cry of grief, at which his warriors were sure that he must have lost his reason. But having given 3 shouts of grief which rocked the very mountains of the countryside, he resumed his command on sanity. Tell me, daughters, how may I restore you to human form? Alas, dear father, there is nothing you can do, for no one has the power to release us in this world nor the other world, not until 900 years has passed and the Prince of Connacht marries a Prince of the Mannan. Lir, this time joined by his warriors, raised another 3 shouts of grief, and their grief was carried all over Ireland, so that the trees bent before it and the waves receded from the shore in terror. We have left only with our speech and our reason, Fionnuala explained. That being so, replied Lir, you will come and dwell with me in my palace, and still live as if you were in human shape. Alas, dear father, that cannot be so, for Aoife has condemned us to live on water, and we have only allowed speech in order to make sweet music to those who wish to hear it. Lir and his warriors encamped that night, and the children of Lir sang and made music for them, and was so sweet did they sing that they all fell into a deep calm. In the morning Lir went to the water's edge. My heart is broken, and I must leave you here, far from my empty hall. I now curse the moment I saw Aoife's smiling face that hid a cruelty which none could plumb the depths of. I shall know no rest. I shall go into the never-ending night, for never more will I know a tranquil hour. In tears and sadness they bade farewell, and Lir and his warriors rode on to the Bodaric's palace. He was greeted with respect by the Bodaric, and when he met Aoife, his face was a mask to hide his feelings. The Bodaric said, I was hoping that you would come with your children, for I loved them as if they were my own, but Aoife has told me that you refuse to let them come near me, lest harm befall them. Then Lir turned to Aoife. Let Aoife bear witness to the truth. She has turned them into swans and left them on the loch. The Bodaric had suspected something, especially when none of Aoife's servants would answer his questions, but he could not believe such a terrible thing. He turned to Aoife to seek denial and saw the truths of Lir's accusations written on her. For a moment or two the Bodaric stood before Aoife with his shoulders hunched, bowed down in sorrow and anguish. He had been foster father to Aoife and her sister Aoife, and he had loved them both, just as he had loved Aoife's children as if they were his own. Then he raised himself, and his brows were creased in anger. Aoife, once my foster daughter, what have you done? It is beyond forgiveness. As bad as the suffering of these poor children of Lir is, your suffering will be worse. Aoife, terrified, dropped to her knees, her hands held out in supplication. There was fear in her face, for she knew what vengeance the gods could take. But the Bodaric's face was filled with a terrible, tormented anger, and he did not heed her. Spare my life, she cried. That I will, for the snuffing out of your soul is but to show you mercy. Answer this question, for you are bound to do so, of everything that is on earth, and above it, or beneath it, or everything that flies or creeps or burrows seen and unseen, horrible in itself or in its nature. Tell me what you fear the most. Aoife crouched with shaking limbs. I fear the Macha, Bad, and the Naman, the three forms of the Morrigan, the goddess of war and death and slaughter, and most of all her blood-drinking raven form. Then that is what you shall be for as long as the mortals believe in the goddesses of death and battle. Then the Bodaric struck her with his magical wand of office, and she immediately transformed into the hideous form of a croaking raven, with blood dripping on her beak. All the people of the palace of the Bodaric were forced to turn away and hide their eyes from the terrible malignant form. All save the Bodaric and Lir himself, who gazed on her without any expression at all. The eyes of Aoife stared up from the raven's head and sought mercy in the gaze, but found none at all. Then, with her leathery flapping wings, the blood drooling from her gaping mouth, the raven rose upwards and croaked hoarsely, then flew away into the sky, doomed to remain so until the end of time. Then the Bodaric embraced Lir, and they shared anguish, and all the Tuatha De Danann and all the goddesses and gods of Erin went down to the shores of the loch and encamped there. And the sons of Mila, the Milesians, came from their courts, and even the misshapen Fomorians and the Nemedians, and all the people of the land of Ireland came. A great camp was made at the lakeside. There the children of Lir raised their voices and sang sweet music to them, and it is said that no sweeter or sadder music was ever heard in this part of the world or in the other world. Around the shores of the lake the encampment became permanent, and the children of Lir never wanted for company. The people remained, held by their love for the four white swans. The children of Lir talked with the people, and during the evenings sang their incomparable songs. and no matter what trouble beset those who heard the music, they drifted into a calm sleep and awoke refreshed. The 300 years the children of Lir rested on the loch's waters. At the end of the 300 years, Fionnuala said to her brothers, "The time has come when we must bid farewell to these waters and all our friends, and to our father Lir, for we must travel to the stormy waters between Ireland and high-hilled Scotland." So on the following morning they spread their wings and rose among the sadness and sorrow and the wailing of their father. Fionnuala called out as she rose, "Tears swell down our cheeks, grief in our hearts. Now time dictates our departure. Sad our tears, like the waters of the lake, calm, deep, we may not tread again, for it is our black storm, the endless wrath of Moyle's sea, dare to linger in fear for the next 300 years." And all the children cried, "Our paths are drawn down the twisted road of time. Destiny traps us, in spite of men and gods, and no hope may come even in our dreams, no laughter, no wish for tomorrow, until the sorrow of our lives is ended. Though we go from here, dear father, Lir, the storm-tossed, our hearts will forever remain with you." Then they circled once more in the sky and flew away to the northeast. Great was the sadness of the gods and the ordinary men and women of Ireland from then on. Great the sadness of the goddesses and the women too. None were so loved as much as the children of Lir. The High King summoned the Bretons, the learned lawmakers, and from that day forward, according to the law of Ireland, no subject of the High King, nor any of the 5 provinces were ever allowed to kill a swan. Thus states the law. The children of Lir had now alighted on the Struna Mail, or the Sea of Moyle, which today is called the North Channel, which runs in the turbulent waters between Ireland and Scotland. It was a harsh, stormy sea, cold and foreboding. The children there were cold and fearful. The poor 4 children. The sea was not like the pleasant waters of the loch. Here the violent winds drove them up and down, with sleet and snow, and there was little or no food for them. No misery could be worse than the restless sea between them. Then one day Fionnuala sensed something in the air. A fierce storm was approaching. She knew it was going to be more fierce than any other storm before, so she turned to her brothers. "There is a bad tempest following, and it is sure that the winds and the tides will separate us. We must fix in a meeting place, so that if we are parted, we shall sure to find one another again." Fikra agreed. "Sensible is that suggestion, my dear sister. Let's meet at Carrick-on-Rone, as that is where we know the rock is." Carrick-on-Rone was a rocky outcrop in the sea. The storm came up abruptly. A wailing wind spread across the sea, whipping up the waves, and lightning flashing split the heavens, and the sea clawed at the 4 poor forms which huddled together in its raging billows. Storm-tossed, wind-driven, they were hurled into the black gloom. When dawn broke, and there was an easing of the tempest, Fionnuala found that she was alone in the waters. There was no sign of her brothers. Feeling desolate, she made her way towards the rock in the sea, where they agreed to meet. Cold and filled with anguish, she reached the rocky outcrop. There was still no sign of her brothers. Alas, alas," she cried, "there is no shelter, no rest for us, and my heart is broken in me. Gone are my loved ones in the bitter night. Gone is everything but my grief, my cold, my hunger, and my fear. They are now my constant companions." She climbed onto the rock and peered around. "Alas, alas, my brothers are lost in the wild tempest. Death itself would be a small mercy. Is there no pity in this world for me? Will I never see my brothers that are now dearer to me than all of the human race? Alas, alas, no shelter for me, nor rest. Have we not suffered enough agony, nor cruelty enough? Or does the depths of the long anguish continue forever?" She was so sunk into despair that she wished to die, and took one last look at the grey skies before she decided to succumb to death. But in the grey darkness she saw a white speck. She peered again, and there, bedraggled but flying bravely, was a tiny wind-tossed swan, making its valiant way towards the rock. It was Con. With a cry of joyous recognition, she rose up towards him, urging him on. She helped poor Con, now more dead than alive, onto the rock. Then came Fikra, limping feebly through the shallows, and it took a mighty effort of Fionnuala and Con to bring him to safety. They huddled with only the warmth of their wings to revive themselves. Yet Fionnuala was still sad. "It was only Abe were here, then all would be well with us." As if at her words they saw Abe coming towards them, he rode the waves proud, and he was well and radiant with his dry feathers. He came ashore and told them that he'd found the welcome in a great cave on the shore of the high-filled Alba, and was thus able to shelter from the fury of the storm. And he came and gave his siblings his warmth and comfort. "Oh," cried Fionnuala, "wonderful it is to be in life and together again. But we have 300 more years of this salt sea, and we must prepare for such storms as this." And so it was, alas, so it was. For many long years they endured out in the storm-tossed sea of Moyle, first sheltering here and there, while great winds and howling tempests tried to separate them. Though never again did it ever succeed in doing so, as it had done so in the first great storm, for now they knew the cave of the high-keeled Alba, and they fled to it for safety, the coming of the storms. So it came out one day that they were swimming close to the shores of Ireland, by the mouth of the River Bann in Ulster, and looking towards the shore they saw a great procession riding to the south. They were the chiefs and lords and attendants and warriors, who were clad in the splendour of their cloaks. They rode on white horses. Bright lights glinted in their armour, their shields and their weapons. "Who can they be?" wondered Ficra. "A party of warriors?" suggested Con. "Warriors off to fight some great war," hazarded Eve. "Let us swim closer, that we may find out the meaning of this great cavalcade," suggested Fionnuala. Now when the party of warriors saw the swans swimming towards the shore, they turned and went down to meet them. At the head were 2 sons of the Bo Derek. They greeted the swans with cries of joy and happiness, for, they said, they had been searching for the Children of Lir for many years, travelling along the coast of the Sea of Moyle between Ireland and Scotland. They assured them that they had brought the love of the Druid to their outcasts. Most of all, they brought the love of their father Lir, and that of the Bo Derek. The Children of Lir immediately asked about the health of their father Lir, and after him that of the Bo Derek. "They are both well," said the sons of the Bo Derek, "and the hosts of the Daedanan are celebrating the feast of Goam, the smith god, at your father's own She. Their happiness would be complete if you could share in those festivities. It has been so long since you left the shores of the loch that they sent us out in search of news of you." The eyes of the children clouded when they heard this. Suffering and torment had been our lots since we left the loch. No tongue can ever utter what we have been through, but we will give you a song which you must remember and take back to our father and to your father, and you must sing it to the host of the Daedanan. Then the Children of Lir raised their voices and sung the sad lament. "Bleak and cold is our home, ice-wet are our feathers, no comfort for us. Pain and sadness is our only guide. The pitiless sea is our constant companion. Grief, grief is our only warmth in the bleak heartland world which is ours." The sons of the Bo Derek repeated the sad song and bade farewell to the Children of Lir. The 4 swans returned to the icy waters of the Sea of Moyle and drifted away from the shore. When they had vanished, the 2 sons of the Bo Derek shed a tear and turned to their men, who also wept in their grief, towards their homes. They finally reached Lir Shee, and all the Daedanan gathered there to hear the news, including the Bo Derek. The sons of the Bo Derek sang the sad lament of the Children of Lir. Lir was so overcome by anguish that he was unable to utter his grief and sat like a stone statue. The Bo Derek put forth a hand around him to comfort him. "Our powers cannot help them, but they are still in this life. It is good to know that one day this power will be broken and they will be free from their suffering." For 3 long centuries the Children of Lir suffered upon the terrible waters between Ireland and Scotland. It seemed a time without end. But at last time came when Fionnuala called her brothers together. "It is now time to leave this place and fly to the west. Now we must go to the Atlantic." They took wing with trepidation, for it had been promised that their suffering on the Atlantic would be even greater, and yet none of them could imagine a suffering greater than what they had endured the last 300 years on the cold sea between Ireland and Scotland, battered by the storms sent by the winds and the raging seas. Across the kingdom of Ulster they flew. Across the kingdom of Ulster they flew. Across its great lakes and mountains. Across the lands and the great bays we now know as Sligo, in the kingdom of Connacht, until they alighted in the seas. Across from a place now called Erris in County Mayo. For there was no point further west that could be reached. This was where the known world, the Gaels, the Tuatha Dé Danann, and all the other tribes ended. when the great western ocean, and across it, far, far away to the west, was the other world, and the haven of lost souls, the lost land of High Brazil. The waters were not as cold as the Sea of Moyle, but the storms were much, much stronger, the waves harsher, and the pounding rocky coastline was far more treacherous. Their suffering continued. Now it happened that there was a young farmer and a fisherman named Afrak Nibail Numurtha, who is now called Belmullet. And one day, while he was cultivating the land, he heard the singing in the seas. Looking seaward, he saw the 4 swans dancing on the waves and singing their sad songs. He was entranced, for he had the soul of a poet, and the prefix of his name, A, means the poetic inspiration and learning. Therefore, every day he went to the shore, listening to the songs of the children, for in his heart was the heart of a Druid. Now the day came when, having made himself known to the children, he found that they were able to converse with him. Each day he talked with them, and gradually told the story to him. He came to love each one of them, and they came to love him, for he was gentle and a learned, wise soul. Because he was a poet and a storyteller and a true bard, he began to tell their story to his neighbours at evening gatherings. Although he refused to let anyone meet the 4 swans for fear that some harm might befall them, his tale began to spread out through the kingdom of Connacht. We might add that, were it not for the tales of Afric, we might not even know the sad tale of the Children of Lir, for their story would have been lost with the coming of the Christ people. That the children of still suffered, let there be no doubt. The seas of the western oceans are not kind. So cold was they at times, the Atlantic and all around them in Belmullet froze with black ice, and snow came down on a white sheet. According to Afric, no other nights in the 9 centuries of torment were so pitiless as the winter nights off Belmullet. Finuala's 3 brothers confessed that they were not far away from commencing their journey to the other world. Death was approaching them, and in spite of Finuala's lamentations, the icy fingers of Dom, Lord of Death, was reaching out to transport their souls westward. Then in the depths of her misery, Finuala felt a strange warming feeling within her. She could not understand it. She stopped her wailing and allowed her mind to experience a strange, comforting feeling that enveloped her. It was consoling, soothing to her very being. Words formed in her mind, and the words were the great song of American, the Druid. In spite of the howling winds and the crashing of the white foam seas on the rock, she raised her voice and began to sing the words. I am the wind that blows across the ocean. I am the wave of the ocean. I am the murmur of the billows. I am the bull of the 7 combats. I am the vulture on the rocks. I am the rays of the sun. I am the fairest of the flowers. I am the wild boar in valor. I am the salmon in the pool. I am the lake on the plain. I am the skill of the craftsman. I am the word of science. I am the spear point that gives battle. The God in the head of man, who creates the fire of thought. Who is it that enlightens the assembly upon the mountain if not I? Who tells the ages of the moon if not I? Who shows the palace where the sun goes to rest if not I? Who calls the cattle from the house of Tetra? On whom do the cattle of Tetra smile? Who is the god that fashions enchantments? The enchantment of battle and the wind of change? Finuala stopped singing the ancient chant. She found that her 3 brothers were also singing with her. I do not understand this, brother, she said, yet I feel that the same power here with us, which is beyond the understanding, is so great and awe-inspiring. It is a truth that we must abide with the truth against the world, for we will abide no matter our fate. We will always be, no matter our shape, no matter who we are, in this world or the next. Our spark of thought, once ignited, can never be extinguished, and in spite of the cold, the storm, and the agony of their torment, their souls were renewed and the hope was reborn within them. So they remained there off Belmullet for the allotted 3 centuries. The day came when Finuala called to her 3 brothers and told them, the appointed hour has come. We can now leave this place and fly to our father at Shifanacha in the warm interior of Ireland. Lir and the children of Danu, the mother goddess, will rejoice to see us. With gladness in their hearts the four swans, and circling over Belmullet where Aefric once lived, for being merely a mortal he had long grown old and died, as had his children and his children's children. They set off eastwards to the palace of mighty Lir. A great sadness waited for them, for there was no sign of Seed Phoenicia, desolation there in its place, nothing stirred there, save the winds across the hills and the rushes of overgrown grasses. There was no sign of the children of Danu, no sign of the old gods of Erin. True it was that the descendants of the sons of Mila, the first mortals of Erin, still lived on, but they had rejected the ancient gods and goddesses through some vague memories of them, which were greatly distorted, now living in the time of the Christ folk. But gods and goddesses only exist as long as memory and respect for them remain. The mortals had driven the ever-living ones underground into the hills, and eventually those immortals dwelling in the hills, the Sidhe, were relegated in people's minds to simple fairy folk. Even the names of the greatest of the gods were forgotten. Lulanfada, the sun god, and the god of all arts and crafts, who was the father of the hero Cuchulainn by a mortal woman, had gone. The mortals now remembered the great god only as a little fairy craftsman whom they called Little Stooping Lou, which would later be mispronounced as the leprechaun by the Christ folk. After 9 centuries of suffering, the poor children of Lir found that the mortals had finally destroyed their gods. The Tuatha Dé Danann were all dead. Even more devastating was the fact that it was only their stepmother Aoife, in the guise of the evil Morrigan, the goddess of death and battles, that the Christian people kept alive, for they continued to take pleasure in bloodshed and war. Horror overcame the four swans as they perched on the desolate landscape. There they sang a sad lament. Whither have gone the stately palaces of our father? Weeds and nettles grown the place of the noble pillars and the walls. Silence fills the desolate hill, not even the whisper of the voices remain. Where are the gods and their goddesses? Where are the heroes and the noble kings? Not even as mould do they lie in the graves. There was nothing left. So they paid their sad tribute to a world that had disappeared and left them behind. There was now no home left for them. Fionnuala called out to her brothers, "Little hope for us here, but the curse remains until a prince of Connacht shall marry us. So let us fly back to Connacht, to the only home we ever knew, which was the Atlantic. Let us go back there in a more sheltered waters and await that day which Aoife foretold would come to pass." So they rose up into the air and flew to the west and circled over Belmullet, but it wasn't to the spot they went, for Fionnuala spied a pleasant little land, and it was called Innisglowr. On this island was a sheltered lake, not large at all, but enough to give them shelter and food and keep them safe from the mortals who had rejected their father and the others of the Druid Dé Danann. To their surprise, they found one mortal living on a tiny cottage on the island, and soon they grew to know him well. He was a kind and gentle holy man. They called him the beloved person. The holy hermit, who had the heart of a druid, would listen to their singing and was in great wonder of it, for he had never heard such sweet music. Each day he would listen to their songs and knew the song of eternal truth. One day the holy hermit came to them and said, "Beloved children of Lir, you may come ashore with me, for the day has come when your enchantment shall be ended." Having heard the story of Aoife's curse, the beloved one had learned that the king of Connacht desired a new wife. The woman he had chosen was a princess from Cashel. History records their names. Leonada ruled Connacht in the year AD 649 until his death in AD 655, when Fingon of Cashel is recorded as dying in the year AD 629, and they ruled Munster from a seat at Cashel when the marriage proposal was made. The condition that was given as a wedding gift was the 4 singing swans whom she'd heard so much about. Indeed, the story of the Children of Lir had long been known to the court of Connacht from the stories that Afrec once told. Now the princes of Munster were concerned because they heard that these were no ordinary birds to be given as presents to appease the vainglory of a man or woman. However, the terms of the marriage contract were made plain by him by an emissary of the princess. When the king of Connacht heard the princess positively refused to marry unless the gift be made, he reluctantly accepted and said that if she came to court the birds would be waiting for her, At the same time he sent messengers to Innisglowr and told them to send the 4 swans. The holy man refused, and great was the anger of the king of Connacht. Not just his word broken, but his very pride was hurt. He had turned in anger from his future wife, who had made the impossible demand, to the beloved one, so he gathered his royal bodyguard and they set off to Innisglowr. "You have insulted the king, Holy One," shouted Langan. "You refuse to give me the swans so that I may present a present of them to the Princess of Munster and make her my bride. I have no power to give you these poor creatures any more than you have power to take them from me." The king, bold in anger, laughed harshly and signalled, "No power? I will show you the power of the king of Connacht." And he had a silver chain placed around the necks of each swan. Then, taking the ends of the chains in his hand, he began to draw them towards the boat. Far away on the great rock of Cashel in Munster, where the palace of the kings of Cashel dwelt, Dactine had been talking to her brother, the king, Menach, a wise man. He had heard the story of the Children of Lir, and he said to her, "A bad thing is this, sister. This is no ordinary gift that you demand from the king of Connacht to appease your curiosity. In this you mock the powers of the Druids and the other worlds." Now Dactine was a kindly and gracious lady, although given to vanity and sometimes besets a person in such a large position. In that moment she realized what had been asked was unjust, so she agreed with her brother and sent forth a message to the palace of the king of Connacht, telling him that he would marry her even without the gift of the 4 swans. Further, she made haste to follow the messenger with all her entourage, ready for the marriage ceremony. That was happening at the very moment when King Langan was trying to drag the 4 Children of Lir to his boat and return them to the mainland. Each of the swans began to lose their white downy coats. Slowly, before his eyes, all of those gathered there, the 4 swans grew into human shape and stood under the light of a summer's day. But instead of returning to what they had once been, the 4 bright young children, the pride and love of their father, the great god Lir, they stood with the accumulation of years of their exile. Yet there was dignity in those years, for they were, after all, the Children of Lir, the children of the god of the Tuatha Dé Danann. When King Langan saw this, his eyes filled with terror, and he fell to his knees before the aging Fionnuala. "Forgive me, lady, my mind was filled with vanity, for I wanted nothing more than Dactine to be my wife." Fionnuala smiled gently at the king. "Return to your palace, mighty king. Your princess will be yours, and even now stands at your palace gates remorseful that she made such a demand on you. You will be happy and have a long reign." The king and his bodyguard took to the boat, still in awe and trembling at what they had just witnessed. Not so the beloved one, who came forward. He embraced them with love and tenderness. "What can I do for you, my children?" he asked, for he was not able to change his mode of addressing those who he loved so well. "We've grown tired," said Fionnuala, "and have left a few moments of life. Now our torment is about to end. You must help us and bless us. We have long outlasted our allotted span, for what was ours and our world is no more. It is right that we go, though we are also in sorrow that we should leave you too, our trusted beloved friend." The beloved one was tearful. "Tell me what I must do." "No more than bury us all here in the sacred spot. Bury us in the tradition of our people. Bury us standing facing one another, as we have so often stood in this world." The holy hermit dug the grave, and as he dug, the Children of Lir sang their last lament. But gone were their beautiful voices that they had while they were swans. However, it made the words more beautiful than any hermit had ever heard. "Death is near, our pain nearly ended. Stretched out a hand of blessing, soon we shall sleep and make our bed comfortable, that we may lie with the sound of the gentle waves and the whispering in our ears. Place us together, as so often we were placed, 4 together, facing each other, a loving hand holding each other's in eternal, unbreakable clasp. Death is near, sleep is now come, as a joy to end our sorrow." And when the last words of their song were distant whispers in the air, the beloved one turned and found them all locked in the last embrace. The tears fell from his eyes like bubbling waterfalls. As he bent to them, a strange thing occurred. They were children again. 4 lovely young children with golden hair and happy faces. They turned radiantly to him and gazed at him for a moment with love. Then they were gone, and their bodies of the 4 ancient ones lay dead at his feet. In accordance with the wishes the beloved one took them and washed their bodies. Then he wrapped poor corpses in their clothes and placed them in the grave. Fionnuala was placed on one side, with Con at her right hand and Fikra at her left, and with Abe standing before her. Their hands were clasped in unbreakable unity. Then, over their bodies, he placed the traditional branches of a broom. When this was done, the sorrowing holy hermit raised a monument and engraved their names upon the stone and sang the lamentation of sorrow. My eyelids drop tears, and great is my anguish. It is sorrowful for me to be in a life after passing of these souls. Sad in my eye, heart is withered, since the grave of these souls was dug. It is said, though I cannot vouch for it, that if you still believe in the old gods and the old goddesses of Ireland, and your boat circles the Isle of Ilishglower on a balmy summer's evening, if you listen carefully, you may still hear the beautiful sad music of the Children of Lir.